What are the chances that you can score a southbound permit for the JMT out of Yosemite? Do bears really smell freeze-dried foods like mountain houses? And what do I do to train for my hikes? All of that and more coming right up. Welcome back, hikers, to another week's Q&A. I'm Bigfoot, and we're back here. We're back here again. I feel like I just did this the other day. I did just do this like a couple days ago. Ready to get geared up for another dozen questions I'm answering of yours. If you want your questions featured in next week's Q&A, go down in the comment section below and ask whatever your heart desires. Let's go ahead and get started with our first question. Survey: should Bigfoot have a new show called Drunk Q&A? I, for one, vote yeah. All right, section hiking the AT. Guess what's going on? Another beer, another Q&A, you got your wish. What GPS system you use, or do you use your phone? I use the DeLorme InReach Explorer by Garmin. I've been using it for about 2 or 3 years now. Now I also use an app called Guthooks. It is a fantastic application that you have. It's made for all your smartphones out there. Basically what it does is it uses your location services. You have to have it turned on. Basically what you can do is you can track where you are at on the trail when you don't have cell phone data or cell phone coverage. It is absolutely fantastic. If you haven't tried it out, make sure you get it and look at it. You can actually get a free version of it. They will give you the first 8.8 miles, which is the approach trail, for free. But check it out. See if you like it or not. They have all kinds of different hikes in the US and a few outside of the US. Now, the reason why I use DeLorme is because it has the ability to be able to have two-way messaging. So I can actually reach out to my family or friends, Miss Bigfoot, and have conversations when I don't have cell data. So that's my primary focus why I go with the DeLorme. How do you train for your hikes? You always seem to be in good shape. Do you have any training tips? I'm doing the JMT northbound. Crazy Kev 5, I definitely have you fooled because I would definitely say that I'm not always in the best of shape. But ever since I finished the AT in 16, my body has just been able to be more adaptive to the trails. I feel like I get my trail legs and get in trail condition way faster than ever before. As far as training goes along, I try to run like 25 or 30 miles a week when spring rolls around. It's a little more difficult in the winter months because I have to basically run on a treadmill. I hate running on a treadmill, but I try to get out, run 25, 30 miles. Sometimes in the past, I actually signed up for like half marathons or marathons to help keep me motivated. I always thought that helped me get ready for hikes. I try to go out and find terrain that will challenge me with elevation. I'm not trying to find trails that are really flat, aren't really gonna challenge me physically and of course mentally. If I can average over 200 feet per mile, that is really, really strong. On the AT, the average ascent per mile is about 240 or something like that. Now that's average from Georgia all the way through Maine. Now, if you take out like the middle states, that's going to increase a lot more, but the mid-Atlantic states really bring that average down. But more or less, if you can stay somewhere above 200 feet per mile, you're probably in a pretty good position for training, especially for someone like the JMT. What are your thoughts on the Ice Age Trail in Wisconsin? Any interest in through hiking it? All right, well, Wisconsin. We really don't like each other. People from Wisconsin and people from Minnesota. Cheeseheads, absolutely not. Just kidding, just kidding. I've thought about it just because it is so close to where I live. The only thing though is like half of the trail is like somewhere around 1,200 miles. Half of the trail, you're actually walking on like sidewalks and roads and things of that nature, and that doesn't spark as much interest to me. I'd rather be out in the backcountry, maybe down the road, but trails that are distances longer, like 1,000 miles that are on my sites, would definitely be the PCT and CDT first. Once I'm done with those, then we can talk about some other things. I plan on using mostly Mountain House meals. Do they emit odors? I'm going to purchase an Ursac because hanging a bear bag seems more than I could handle, especially when tired. That's a very good question. There's actually been kind of like this back and forth. I've heard both that they don't emit odors, and I've heard that they do. I think the thing to think here is that bears can smell better than us by about 2,100 times. So think about that for a second. Bears have a stronger sense of smell than bloodhounds. Whatever that package is going through, there's probably at some point in time going to be something that has an odor that is going to be touched on the outside of that bag. I just wouldn't trust it. As much as you want to think that freeze-dried food does not emit any odors, I think that the likelihood of something on that package smelling is probably pretty good. I wouldn't take the risk. Planning on doing a lot of hiking in the Whites in the spring, summer, fall. What are the tenting opportunities like? Is a tent better than a tarp in that sort of terrain? Let's first talk about the tent versus the tarp. You're probably going to have to bring some sort of bug net if you are bringing a tarp, because you're probably going to be exposed to bugs and things of that nature. So when you add in the tarp with the bug net and everything else, you compare that to some of the ultralight tents, there really isn't that big of a gap anymore. Now, if you don't own an ultralight tent, you're not buying one, and you own a heavier tent or maybe like a freestanding tent, perhaps, yeah, definitely perhaps if you own all of that gear. For me personally, I'm going to stick with my Solplex or Duplex. Number one, because I own both of them. But number two, I'm probably going to need the bug netting anyway. Like I said, there's just not that big of a gap between the weight of those things and these ultralight tents. Now for tenting opportunities, I only hiked through the Whites on the Appalachian Trail. There were a lot more sites that you could pitch a tent than I actually realized. I didn't think that there was going to be, but I remember recalling quite a few, probably like 20 or something like that, between the start of the Whites and to the Mahoosics, maybe more than that. There are definitely opportunities to be able to pitch a tent. Now, the one thing to note for the folks out there that are thinking about hiking out in the Whites, if you are above tree line, you cannot stay above tree line. It is forbidden unless it is the middle of winter and there's like 2 feet of snow. Outside of those conditions, it's a no-go. The Duplex Flex upgrade doesn't work well in wind without the added support of trekking poles. They quote this in the Flex tent video. Yes, great point, Jason. Thanks for mentioning that. I am never in the backcountry without my trekking poles, so if I needed them, I would always be able to pitch those for the added security, but I definitely would like to be able to have the opportunity sometimes to be able to have a freestanding tent. The Duplex is my favorite tent, so it's like best of both worlds, right? Kind of. But anyway, I'm going to get the upgrade on my Duplex tent so I actually can have the Flex tent upgrade. Check that out in a future upcoming hike of mine. Headgear, what do you think of Tilly hats? I am thinking for sun, and since I wear glasses, also rain. Also, do you always wear a head sweats hat? I do, sweats a lot. Well, my damn camera just turned off and I was talking to it for about 4 minutes or 5 minutes before I realized. Anyway, let's continue. Okay, Tilly hats, I think they're great for sun and rain. I would recommend them. I actually own a couple myself. It's been a little while since I've actually brought them out. I bought them and wore them out to different trips on the Bounty Waters. Because I sweat a ton, I usually have to wear a bandana when it's like really hot out, because most hats will not be able to keep the sweat from dripping down my face. That just annoys me. With the head sweats hats, why I prefer them, they just do a better job with controlling the sweat. I cannot stand having the sweat dripping down my face, and because I sweat so much as well, most hats that I've worn don't control the sweat at all, and those ones do, so that's what I prefer. Have you had any issues with your tracking points being inconsistent on your inReach? i.e. like mileage differences or double tracks? Thanks. In terms of mileage differences, yes, you are not going to have the exact mileage from your DeLorme, Spot, whatever your GPS is, unless if it's updating like a GPS watch like this, which is going to suck out a ton of battery. With the DeLorme inReach Explorer, I typically have my points sending out every hour or so. Just recently when we did the Winter Foresight Challenge, I had it set up for 10-minute intervals. It assumes from point to point that that is the exact distance that you went. You went as the crow flies. It doesn't take into account zigzags and ups and downs and all that kind of stuff. The mileage is going to be off. There were times I remember talking to my dad when I was through hiking the Appalachian Trail, and he was like telling me, why are you only hiking like 1.2 miles an hour when I was probably hiking about 3 miles an hour because of that. You're going to have differences in mileage. That's just the way it is. It will be more accurate though if you have the tracking points sent more frequently, but it's going to drain your battery. Secondly, inconsistencies. I have had some issues with my DeLorme where it was not sending out the tracking points when I turn it on. Typically, it's like right at the very beginning when I haven't used it for a while. What I usually have to do before I go out on an adventure is I have to sync it to the Garmin application for your desktop, and I sync it to that just to make sure that all the software is up to date, and typically I don't have any problems once I do that. Now I do have the older version of the Garmin. The newer version, I am not so sure if you'll have those issues or not, but outside of that, there's not really anything else that I can recall having issues with my DeLorme. I love the DeLorme. I've been using it for like 3 years now, and I will continue to keep on bringing them on my future hikes. Being from Minnesota, have you been up through the Boundary Waters area or Quetico? Any thoughts on those? I've recently been looking into those areas. The BWCA Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness is my absolute favorite place to go. I've been to the BWCA maybe like 20 or 30 times. There's so many different entry points in the BWCA where you can start or end your trip. I have been to almost every single entry point on the west side, everywhere around Ely and west, and a little bit east of Ely. And then on the eastern side, I've been to a few of the entry points at the end of the Gunflint Trail, but it's an amazing time. I highly recommend it. You will have a blast. Now, my goal when I go is to try to get in as far as I can. The further that you get in, the less people that you're gonna see and the better experience that you're gonna have. Anyways, I could talk forever about the Boundary Waters. I highly recommend it. Do it. I have 2 years to plan my JMT hike. How likely do you think it is that I get a permit southbound for the days that I want? More likely to get it if I'm going solo. How far ahead of time do they let me know? All right, let's talk about the chances of getting a southbound permit out of the hardest area to get the permit, which is out of Yosemite. Every day there is somewhere between 1,000 to 2,000 permits that are being sent through the permitting system. And in those 1,000 to 2,000 permits, they're going to give away 35 total permits. That's it, 35 permits. If there was 1,000 people that were applying, you have 35 permits. You got about a 3.5% chance each day. Now on your JMT permit, you will have as much as a 21-day span that you can put for entry dates on the JMT heading out of Yosemite. With those 21 days, if you get 9 on the first day, then your permit rolls into the second day, so on and so forth. So you can probably just do the math, but the chances aren't great. But if you have a 21-day window, and then after that 21-day window, if you have the time when you can throw in another permit application for another 21 days, then your chances get a lot better. The folks that I've been talking to this year, I would say is probably somewhere about 30% of the people have gotten permits. Now you mentioned going solo. You definitely have better chances the lower your group size is. If you have a group of like 4 or 5 people and you put on your permit application that the least amount of people that you want on your permit is 5 or 4, it's going to be really difficult to be able to score that. But if it's just 1, you can put a maximum of 4 or 5, whatever your group size is, but a minimum of 1, because if you can only get 1 permit, at least you got it for yourself, your chances are so much better. You need to apply for your permit 168 days out. You try to do it 167 days out, all the permits are going to be gone, which it's 24 weeks. So 24 weeks, you have to be able to apply for those permits out. Now make sure once you send your permit in that you call and verify the office that they got your permit application. This would be so much easier if they had an online process or system to be able to do this, but they are still doing it like it's like 1992. How many days do you think it would take for a newbie to hike 100 miles? I want to do 100 in the Allegheny National Forest, do a test run of all my gear and mental faculties, and to get in shape for my hike of the AT in 2019. Have you ever considered doing the NCT? Someone that is new into hiking, I think there's lots of variables that depend and really will vary on person to person on how fast they can do those 100 miles. For example, like the terrain that you're going to be hiking in, the age of the hiker, and the weather that you get. I mean, there's just so many different things. The average person that's out there hiking that's just new into backpacking is probably going to hike somewhere around 6 or 7 miles a day or so. And this is just right out of the gate, because most of the folks that are new to hiking are probably going to bring a lot of extra stuff in their pack, which means their pack is going to be a lot heavier. They're going to have to make more stops. They're going to be exhausted a lot faster, so on and so forth. So I'm going to take a guess that the average new hiker is probably going to hike 100 miles somewhere in like 2 weeks, and that's with probably not very many zeros or no zeros at all. If you are looking at trying to take off time from work and you just want to make sure that you have enough time, I would probably look at about 2.5 weeks, and that should be totally good to go. But again, all those variables are going to play a big role into how fast or how slow that you want to do that 100 miles. Now the NCT, I have not considered doing it, kind of because of what I said earlier with the Ice Age Trail. My focus for long distance trails would be the CDT and the PCT first. I want to get those things done. That, if I had the time, those would be my biggest priority over anything else. Then after that, maybe, but I definitely think that I would do parts of the NCT. It goes right through Minnesota. I can see myself just doing a small section hike of the NCT up in Minnesota for sure. Few updates. If you checked out my video on Tuesday, you might have heard that I am no longer hiking the Katy Trail in April. I am going to do the Ozark Trail. That was a question on the Q&A from this last week, was whether or not I'd be doing the OT. I will be doing it in just a few weeks. Now, if you're watching this video on the day that it aired, which is Thursday, March 15th, you only have 3 days left before my Bigfoot t-shirt campaign ends. If you are interested in buying one of the male or female designed shirts on the channel, you got to do it before the end of day Saturday, which is St. Patrick's Day. I'll throw links on how to check out these t-shirts and buy them below in the show notes, as well as the comment section below. And lastly, if you enjoyed the collaboration that Viking and I did here just this last couple weeks here in February, we have set up a Patreon account that is going to help us try to get together maybe a little bit more often. We got a lot of positive feedback from the collaboration that we did. We'd like to do something like that again, do another challenging hike, really test out the limits. If you're interested in that, I will also link that above, and you can help support us and help us make the decision of where we're going to go next. As I said last week, when the beer is gone, the Q&A is done. I will see you guys next week. Stay tuned for many more sightings, and remember to always follow Bigfoot.